This is the power of Can's prologue. In each episode, we're going to do three things. We're going to have a prologue, which is what comes before. Then we're going to have the meat of the interviews. And along that journey of those interviews, we're going to stop and point out some key learnings along the way. And then in the epilogue, afterwards, we're going to summarize all of that information. What did we cover? What did we learn? What questions are we asking that you can use either as an individual or a team to move from a state of can't to move to a state of can, and then find the state of flow. When you do that, it's an incredible place to be. So we're going to take all of this content and we're going to repurpose it in a variety of different ways over the course of this year. And then we're going to make that available back to the marketplace, the audience, for you to use either as an individual or you to use corporately within your workplace to improve your organization and your team's elite performance. Finding flow, finding the state of can, and the lessons that go into it is not that hard. It's just hidden in plain sight. So with that, let's get on to the episode. Hello everyone, my name is Steve Hirschberger and welcome to the Art of Can experiment. We're not going to call this podcast because we're not really sure if that's what it is or not. Maybe that, maybe something else. We will see. This is our first real episode. So I will tell you I'm nervous as hell. And I'm nervous in part because I have an expert here with me who's going to help us kick off. So Brian Yates, welcome to the Art of Can.
Hi, Steve. Listen, I'm nervous too because being the first on this, does anyone actually ever really want to be the first unless you're like landing on the moon?
Well, maybe. There's this thing, called the finish line that, first is usually good for, but in this instance, we've got no bar to go against.
That's a great point.
So
that's true.
We can do whatever the hell we want, and it's going to be perfect, right? Everything else is judged by us.
We're going to get exactly what we're supposed to today.
Exactly. Okay, so the whole purpose, Brian, of us doing this is honestly, in large part, your brainchild. You pushed me to come up with a couple of interesting ideas to take the concept of flow and extend it out. And here we are in the Art of Flow, which is a podcast or an experiment or something else, not sure what, that is going to turn into other types of content that are all designed to help break down the difference between can and can't, the mindset, the physical action, the energetic aura that is all around us to help people improve themselves, their lives, and the lives of the people that they interact with. So that's the purpose of this. And we're going to explore today what can is and what can't isn't. So you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So Brian, for today's episode, is going to be our expert guide. He is going to lead me through the discussion so I'm not talking to myself, which I do frequently and causes stares. So in this instance, Brian's going to be a bit more helpful in helping guide the conversation. So Brian, where would you like to start?
Why don't we start with this? I think let's actually go back to how this happened. I think you said you wanted to talk about how all of this sort of came together to begin with, right? This is a really new thing that Steve is trying. And we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. We've only spoken one or two times, maybe three times. And he was throwing around all these ideas. And I think we just said, why don't you start putting this on video? It's like, you've got a very chattable face, as friends will say, and you've got a very chattable style. So let's see what we can turn this, what you can do with this thing. Because you have a lot of big ideas that are pretty esoteric. So how do we anchor that a little bit more and put some constraints on it? I think constraints can be super helpful in a way, and put some boundaries on it and just see what comes out of it. Um, so why don't you actually, if I'm leading the way, what I'm really interested in is you say a thing all the time that is can't is the same as won't. Why don't you share what that means and how you've seen it play out for yourself, how you see it play out anywhere?
Well, look, I can speak for myself, and so probably that's to your point, a good place to start. Um, I think like a lot of entrepreneurs or business executives or business owners or whatever phrase you want to put in that is maybe non-corporate. Um, for me, it was creating a facade. So reading from a script and wearing a costume that fit the normal modus operandi, that the thing or pattern that people wanted to see, wanted to be around, wanted to invest in. So for me, that looked like something very specific. The problem was it was kind of like having size 11 feet and wearing size 8 shoes. You could do it. It just wasn't really all that comfortable. And I think for people out there that are wearing a costume and reading from some script that may not be theirs, they get a sense of what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, I kind of get that. Because in the end, you end up with somewhere between imposter syndrome and just unhappiness. You don't. Nothing is ever really enough. Nothing is ever enjoyable, right? Because it's not really yours. It's like playing with some other kid's toy, right? It's not yours. You get to use it for a little bit, and then it's got to go back.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Reading from a script that's not ours is actually language I use all the time, right? And I think one of the, just for anyone watching this, I basically work as, let's call it a strategic leadership advisor. I've got a strong coaching background, a strong coaching bent. And it doesn't come from corporate coaching. It actually comes from sport coaching. It comes from physical coaching. It comes from cycling coaching. It comes from moving people from point A to point Z. But there's another side of it. It also comes from a really strong background in entertainment production. And so knowing knowing what an end product might look like and then working backwards. So that's where my background comes from. So what I want to ask, and so I'm very familiar with this, not speaking from a script that's not ours. What was a moment for you where you realized this is not me, this is not right, this is something feels frictiony for me, and I'm not sure what that is?
Standing up in front of a room of 110 employees as the CEO of a company and talking about CEO operations stuff. It just wasn't, I'm a terrible manager. I was never.
What did you want to talk about in that moment?
What I wanted to talk about, I wanted to honestly, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the art of the possible. I wanted to talk about the story of what we were trying to do. I wanted to do the movie trailer, right? I wanted people to buy in and believe. I got pretty good at key elements of the business, such as in a tech startup, such as raising money in an environment that was very difficult to raise money. A substantial amount of it over a couple of different businesses, because I was really good at telling stories, painting pictures, solving problems. It was the mechanics of certain elements of the business that just didn't fit. It was the wrong size shoe, right? But I wasn't comfortable enough to raise my hand and say, guys, we need to put somebody else in this role. I need to go over here and do this, because you cling to what you think to be true. And we are conditioned not to tell the whole truth. Universally, we are conditioned to not tell the whole truth. And we are universally conditioned to believe that any form of failure, self-induced or otherwise, is a scarlet letter. That you will be judged, banned, penalty boxed, shot, killed, chopped up, and buried, or rendered irrelevant if you say you can't do something. And it's not because you don't want to, it's just functionally you don't know how. You're asking for help rather than saying no. Or you just fail.
You have one of the better failure stories out there, which and I actually celebrate this, right? Because I think it wasn't exactly a failure, right? I think we should talk about a little bit about what this means, right? I think this fear of failure that you talk about, which is, we don't fear failure, we fear what it says about our identity.
I think you take it a step further. We don't fear failure. We fear how we're going to be judged and categorized by others. And then we will own the assessment. So think of it like you write this, you're an actor in a play. You've been given a script. You're doing your level best to play that character. And in that audience is a critic, a play critic. And you get up the next day and you give the performance of your life. It isn't you, right? It isn't your character. It isn't your script, but you give it everything you got. You get up the next day, you open the paper, and you've just been roasted.
Yeah.
And that's what you take away. Because some arbitrary person said, you suck. And that person sitting in the audience saying, you suck, more likely than not, has never been standing in your shoes. Nonetheless,
I think that's exactly what I mean when I say identity level stuff. But I also think that we might have a tendency to be that critic in the audience without even noticing it.
Well, look, if you're standing on the stage and you got the bright lights standing in front of you, right? You don't know who's out there, right? So you manufacture it yourself. Yeah, we are, in fact, our biggest critics, right? We don't give ourselves grace. We don't allow ourselves to find flow. And I think that's one of the things that's important. Look, yesterday I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He's one of the top instructors at the Air Force's Flight Weapons School, right? He's going to be on the art of can in a future episode. And he said to me the other day, we were talking about flow, and he said, imagine riding a roller coaster playing three-dimensional speed chess. And that's what combat pilots have to do. And riding a roller, okay, I've done that. I've never played three-dimensional speed chess, but I can imagine what that's like. That sounds really hard. And he said, what happens is that you are trained to feel, not think. And he said, do you remember watching the movie Star Wars when they were in the Millennium Falcon, and this dates this, it dates him? He said, but Obi-Wan Kenobi said, put the blast shield down, feel it. And he's going with his lightsaber and he gets shot a couple of times by the little drone. But then ultimately he does what he needs to do and he fends it off. And I said, yeah, I remember that. And he said, that's exactly what it is when you're a fighter pilot. He said, you stop thinking about what is going to happen and you start simply going with what you know to do. Your body remembers what it is that you're supposed to do. And then ultimately your mind just gets in the back seat and goes along. And so as we start thinking about standing on that stage and we're projecting that critic out there, or that critic is out there, and we start telling ourselves we can't do this, or somebody is going to judge us because I just flubbed that line, right? And they don't even know it, right? And so rather than just finding that flow and continuing on because you've made a small mistake, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the entire experiment or activity that you're doing is a mistake, but because you fixate on that, quite literally, as my friend Jeremy says, your reality changes at that moment in time from one that takes you to a place where you should go to that moment of failure, in his instance, catastrophic failure.
Right. Why are you, how did this become an interest for you?
Oh, because after I got hit, I started asking people weird questions, Brian. So to back up, I was in a hit and run accident about a year ago and did some real serious damage, like gold medal, win the accident Olympics damage. And then when I came back in the neck brace and back brace, I walked around and I started asking total strangers these questions that just one day came to me. And one of the questions that I asked, without even thinking about it, and I posed it to you and I'll pose it to the people listening. So there's 3 or 4 questions. What would be different if you were not here? What would be different if you were not here? Or you flip it around and say it slightly differently. What should be different because you are here? What would be different about you or the world around you because you are here? And then I'll ask a follow-up question. What is the hardest thing you've ever done mentally, physically, spiritually, or emotionally? And what did that teach you? What did you take away from it, and what are you still using? And then the last question I ask him is, what scares you? So I've asked hundreds of people, strangers, this question. So imagine you're in the line at Starbucks and I tap you on your shoulder and you're in your phone and you turn around and there's a guy standing behind you in a back brace and a neck brace who's all scabbed up. And he goes, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?
It's so good. It's so good. It just makes me happy.
Yeah. Look, most people, about 88% of the people, consistently from 25 questions to 50 to 75 and on up, they can't answer them, Brian. They can't answer them. But there are 12% on average, 12% of the people that don't hesitate. And let me give you a good example. Let me give you one good example. Because when you're telling the story, you're answering the question, whether what you're saying or not is bullshit.
Right.
You know it, right? You're reading from the script. The 12%, it ain't bullshit. So I was in a Starbucks. Yeah, I think it was a Starbucks. Anyways, coffee shop in an airport at JFK. Tap a guy on the shoulder and I said, do you mind if I ask you a question? No. So I asked him the first question. He goes, why are you asking me this question? I was out of the neck brace and back brace, but I said I had a near-death experience. I was hit. He was also a cyclist like us. And he goes, oh my God. So yes, he answered the question. And then he said to me, I said, what should happen because you are here? And he said, I finally decided to live a life that is authentic and unconstrained. I speak ground truths, my words, not his, but I live in a place of truth and I live in the now and I enjoy every single minute that I have because it's a gift. And so you can think, okay, that sounds trite, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, and part of what I do is I make sure that other people know that I'm acting in a genuine way and it's infectious. It is infectious, right? He goes, it just changes people's demeanor. And I said, all right, second question. What's the hardest thing that ever has happened to you mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally? And he goes, one thing, all of them. I go, oh, really? Okay, this should be good. And he said, but it's not what I thought it was for the first year. And I said, what did you think it was? And he said, 2 years ago, my 5th grade daughter got asked out on a date. She's too young to date. and they wanted to go to a movie, and I just was adamantly against it. My wife said that I was being ridiculous. It was just a movie. They should go. And the last thing I said before they headed off to school, my wife was taking her to school, is, you're going to go on this date over my dead body. 12 minutes later, they were hit by a dump truck and killed. And I said, yeah, okay, hard thing. You win, right? That's the one that tops it all. And so he looks at me, he's got tears in his eyes, and he says, but that wasn't the hard thing I had to figure out. I said, what was it? And he goes, I had to learn how to forgive myself and live again. And so all of this is based on that. Is that hard thing that I went through took me to a place where I could learn this lesson and do something valuable with it. And then I asked him the last question. I said, what are you scared of? And he didn't even blink an eye. And he leans into me and he goes, nothing. Which is why he lives in a state of can. Because he doesn't give a flying fuck about the critic. The internal critic or the external critic.
Right. How are you? No. I love this, and I don't want to actually extract the answer from it, so I want to hear it from you. Why are you doing the art of can, and what does it mean to you?
Because I see too many people that I encounter that I either work with, that I know, or that I just bump into, that are in a state of futility. They're in a state of victimhood. They're in a state of anger. They're in a state of depression, anxiety. They're in a state of helplessness, state of resignation, right? And it's not just one thing or one level. It's this tumultuous set of waves that on a daily basis, that one day you wake up and it's a little bit better and you think, oh God, this isn't, this is going to get better. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. And that afternoon, something happens with somebody you work with. And all of a sudden you're reset back to zero. And then you're driving home and you're talking to yourself about how you hate this person that you work with, how they make your life miserable. They must get up in the fucking morning and plan their day to ruin yours. And then you come home, you pull in the garage, you decide that you're going to have a drink first thing. So you pour yourself a big stiff drink. Your wife comes in and says, how was your day? And you spend the next 2 hours ranting and raving to her about how miserable it is. And then you get up and do it again. All of that is nothing more than a set on the play. It is a mirage. It is a false state of being that you have convinced yourself is reality, and you cling to it because it's there.
And what is the reality that the art of can and what you're doing with this experience? What is the reality that you're hoping that helps that person, what that you hope gets them to? What reality is that?
Well, you already know this story, but I'll tell it again for the listeners. And one of the things that we'll do in this is we'll share a couple of images. So I ran a tech company that I really shouldn't have been running, and it wasn't going well until one day it started going well. And it started going really well, really quickly. And it went really well, really quickly because we solved an intractable problem. We solved the Gordian knot, right? What's the Star Trek simulation, whatever it was, that was impossible to beat, right? I'm not that much of a nerd. I'm just close enough that I know that there is such a thing, right?
We're digging for the metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. This is the deep track. But I was watching a show on the History Channel talking about the Rosetta Stone, and bam, it dawned on me that this data problem required a Rosetta Stone. And so we ended up using graph analytics, and we won't go into that, to solve this problem that nobody said could be solved. And all of a sudden, all of the data just went and became exactly what it was supposed to be, and the business took off. Because of that, we had a bunch of hardware that we used in the system. The hardware was really hard for people to use. It was unreliable. It was difficult. It was full of friction. And we realized, man, we could do this without the hardware. So let's just get rid of it. Let's write off $1 million and change worth of hardware because the business is going like this. Well, we had some investors that didn't like that. They liked the hardware because they'd invested in the hardware. That was the business. One day, after putting a lot of my own money into the business and then borrowing money from a bank to put into the business, it all came to an end. Overnight, quite literally, because of a shareholder doing something that most people would say vulture investing. But you know what? He did it. It was his right. And that's what happened. And so I came home and said, hey, honey, do you want the good news or the bad news? Well, what's the good news? The good news is you're not going to have more time together. The bad news is I no longer have a job, and all of the money that we'd saved up is gone. Well, how are we going to make college and high school payments? How are we going to put gas in the car? I have no fucking idea. Okay. Not sure I see the good news in that, but is what it is. Marriage is for better or for worse. Well, for about a week, I was okay with it because I was rationalizing. And then one day, Brian, I'm in a Starbucks. This happens to me a lot in coffee shops. I'm in line and I see a guy I know. And this guy I know had been all over me about 3 months before for something. He needed me to sponsor something for something he was involved in, his company. So as he turned around, he looked over and saw me, and I waved at him, and he did one of these. Turned around, didn't acknowledge me, and just faced forward. He ignored me the entire time we were in Starbucks. And when he got his coffee, he walked out and didn't even look at me, as if I didn't exist, because I now had the plague.
Right.
So that place that I was describing, that the person that goes to work and talks about the having a better day, and then the person completely disrailing them at the end of the day, that became me. So I became the victim, right? All of this started to happen to me. And,
You met your critic. You met your critic in the play right there in the Starbucks.
Oh yeah, he was right there. And then the critic in my head took it from there, right?
Sure.
And it got worse and worse and worse, to the point where over the coming months, I didn't really leave the house much, and I gained 60 pounds, and I started behaving poorly, and it just literally moving into probably close to clinical depression, anxiety attacks, panic attacks in the shower. And then I said to myself, you know what? I'm 50 years old. I'm done. It's over, right? I'll be lucky just to get a job. So I quit. I just quit. Right? What that means is you can't do it, and can't means won't. I chose not to do it. And then one day somebody shows up on my doorstep, a coach that I'd worked with, and looks at me and he says, I've seen the picture. I didn't believe it. This is worse than I thought. We're not going to do this. No. This is not going to happen. You're going to get your ass up, and we're going to start again. And you're going to go back to work. I don't care what it is. If you want to drive an Uber, do that. But you're going to do something. And you're going to do it well. Whatever it is, you're going to do it well. And you need to commit to that. And then you're going to commit to getting yourself back into shape. Because when you look in the mirror and you see the same fat slob with long hair and B cups that you see now, you're going to continue to believe that that's all there is. So
Can I just cut in just for a second?
Yeah.
Here? This is a very well told and well crafted story, and this is a great narrative. But I also want to get to what did it feel like in that moment to have that coach walk in on your life and disrupt the interference, disrupt the message that you'd been saying to yourself? Like, how did that feel for you? Like,
Great question. And the answer is he took the batteries out, right? The batteries that powered the feedback loop, the narrative, right? He literally yanked the battery cables, right? And it stopped for a minute. And then he said, it's time to do something hard. And what he said was, you have 9 months and 1 day. 9 months and 1 day for what? Oh, I signed you up for a 156-mile gravel race at Gravel Worlds, and you're going to go and race across 11,000 feet, and you're going to not only finish, but you're going to place well. And you have 9 months and 1 day to lose 60-something pounds, get yourself into really good shape, and go do something that you thought is impossible that you've never done before. So let's get at it. Right? And so the hard thing, and then he said, oh, by the way, before that event, we've also gotten you into another race that is a couple weeks before that. You have to figure out how to get yourself to Iceland and then go race across around a volcano and over a glacier. And once you're done with that, then you're going to come back and do this. So you got to figure out how to pay for it. You got to figure out how to get yourself in mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual shape for it. And then you need to go do it. So all of a sudden, the calculus for hard changed. And that's when I realized, okay, it can't always leads to a dead end. It's a cul-de-sac. It just stops. When you say can't, it doesn't go anywhere else. That's it.
I'd like to just roll back again, though, to something, to two things now. You say it took the batteries out of the message. Like, tell me where, did it take the air out of your lungs? How did your body respond in that moment? Like, this is a visceral moment to me. And it's not an intellectual one. It is a visceral one where where the message goes down to a cellular level.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was the equivalent of, if you've ever been a kid and you stood on a rock ledge into a lake, that's maybe a little higher than you wanted. So 15, 18, 20 feet, or a high dive if you haven't, but you stood there for a minute and you're frozen because it's really far down. You could hurt yourself. It's better just to turn around and climb down the ladder. Right. But at some point you're standing there and some jerk that Bobby Smith from the 9th grade, shoves you off the cliff and you find yourself in midair. When somebody pulls the batteries out, you're in midair. You can't go back. All you can really do is go down, but you're in that space in between.
Yep. Then I want to move to this next thing that you rolled through pretty quickly about Iceland. You said mental, physical, and spiritual fitness or change to get ready for this.
Mental, physical,
You said
spiritual,
that
emotional.
very quickly.
Yeah. So
but I want to hit on something that I think a lot of us tend to overlook. A lot of us who come from A type, or at least A minus, B plus types, that we tend to roll over pretty quickly because we imagine we can skill our way into whatever. But you said spiritual fitness, spiritual change. And I think that is so fundamentally, I feel that's so fundamentally important. Talk to me about that for you.
There are moments in life when you have a synchronistic event, right? You're thinking about somebody and the phone rings and it's them. right? Or something happens that just is improbable. It's not supposed to happen, but it does. And when those things occur and you cannot easily explain them away, you start to realize that you are a piece of something else. You are a drop in the ocean, as Rumi used to say, or you are a gear in the wheel, an important one, but it's not you. It's not the Steve show. I'm not separate from nature. I'm not separate from everything else. I'm part of it. And when I resist it and I'm not wanting to be part of it, everything we just talked about is where you end up. Right. But when you start realizing and you start appreciating the world around you, that nature delivers things, messages and teachings and moments and synchronicities occur, then you begin to get a sense of, I'm not in this alone. I don't know if it's the universe or God or whatever it is that you want to call it, but I need to start listening more and talking and thinking less. So you start listening with your heart. You start feeling things. You stop forcing them. And when that happens, to talk about Iceland, when I got to the starting line, I thought I had no business being at the Rift. I'm looking around. And by the way, when I'm winging into Reykjavik, mind you, a year before, I couldn't put gas in the car. Right? And so I went back to work. There was a synchronistic moment that occurred, and all of a sudden things just sort of turned around. And I remember looking at the window, seeing the shore of Iceland come into sight and going, I can't fucking believe this. This is not supposed to happen. But there it is. Right? So you find a degree of spiritual peace, right? I'm not in charge of this, and you recognize and are grateful for, I couldn't do this on my own, right? This is a series of dominoes lining up in a very unique way I could not have done. And so you take that and that starts to crowd out all of the negative energy, all of the doubt and burden that we carry, right? It's rocks in the backpack. And so you start putting those rocks down and it gets lighter. And then the path, as you find greater flow, starts to illuminate. You start to see where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to do and who you truly are and what you're truly made of. And so I get to that starting line and I'm sitting there and I default back for a minute. And I don't belong here. I can't do this. I can't, I need to figure out how to fake a mechanical so I can drop out, because I cannot do this.
Fake a mechanical. Yeah. Oh, the battery's not.
I was just riding along and right. So, but yeah, right. That's what I was thinking about.
We've all been there.
Yeah. So you think about it, and then all of a sudden you realize what you're telling yourself is, it's not that you can't do it, you won't do it. And so that just came across my mind. And then I thought, you know what? All right, universe, if I'm not supposed to be here, then you figure it out. Then I crash. But I'm going to give it 110% until I crash. Right? So I get to the second sag stop, and I pull in just to fill up my water pack, and I say to one of the guys working the event, I said, how far from last place am I? Because I'm still in this clingy moment of can't. And he looks at me and goes, what are you talking about? He goes, dude, you're in like the top 30 or 40. You're up front. Go. And I'm not at the pointy end, but for me, I was up front far enough, and it shocked me. It shocked me. And then I started looking around going, holy shit, this is Iceland. This is beautiful.
What am I doing
And
worrying about my place? Look at where I'm at.
right, right, and so I just, and then what came to me was enjoy the ride, enjoy the ride.
This gets me thinking about flow. It gets me thinking about the people that you work with, the teams that you work with, and that for me, I'm completely taken out of the moment. I'm completely taken out of myself when I start worrying about someone else's race and I start focusing on what someone else is doing, right? I'm at a point where I don't care if I come dead last anymore or if I'm in, it doesn't matter. Like I just get up every single day and go ride the bike. And sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't. But I think, and is this for you, this kind of something that you work with teams with is like they measure by the wrong yardsticks. They measure from the wrong perspective.
Right, we get in our own way because we're thinking about the wrong stuff, and I can tell you, I can give you example after example we don't have time for of organizations that are fixated on some problem, some intractable problem. They either want to ignore, right, put it in the drawer like the demand notice, and it'll just go away. It never does. Or they fixate on what they call low hanging fruit, right? And that low hanging fruit's been there for a while. And look, Bryan, you and I both know that if you pay attention to small things in sports and athletics, especially performance, endurance athletics, pay attention to the right small things, they can have outsized results. And so often when you're focused on low-hanging fruit, these long-standing low-hanging fruits, these things that have been there, they are embedded with these interdependent variables. There's lots of things when you pick that 10 different things that are attached to it are going to happen. But when you focus on small things that stand on their own, that are often hidden in plain sight, and you focus on fixing those small things or taking advantage of them, then you can have outsized results. And in one case, rather than changing an entire manufacturing process, we changed 2 steps in a quality process. And this product went from quite literally getting ready to be canceled by this business's customer, to becoming its global gold standard. But the interesting thing is, the team, they continued to beat themselves up, and they saying, well, we were sucking, right? We started in the basement because we didn't pay attention to any of this stuff. So we don't deserve to celebrate the fact that it's now a gold standard because we were so far off the mark. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you started. What matters is that you found your flow. You found the comfort in being uncomfortable to ignore the obvious stuff and go for the non-obvious, and then fix that, and then allow the process to work. And it did.
That's great. This is beautiful. But you identified the person that you kind of want to speak with at the outset of this, right? That person who is in, and maybe this isn't the person you want to speak with, but maybe it's just what you notice out there. You talked about the person who is constantly in a state of victimhood and thinks that feels like everything is happening to them. They drive home. They assume everyone is conspiring to them. They get home. They start drinking. Then they spend the rest of their night complaining to their spouse how everyone is out to get them. And they live in this cycle. What do you want this experiment that you're just kicking off today? Actually, no, let's start. What would you want to say to them? Like, what is the conversation that you want to say to them through this medium here?
Okay, let's talk to the people that are looking and listening to this. And the message is really pretty simple. It's number one, you've allowed a reality that's been created either by yourself or by somebody else to take shape and take form around you. And then now that's what you believe there's all that there is. And that is a mirage. It's a lie. It is, you are one small step away from changing everything if you want to. And so how do you do that? How do you undo or short circuit this process? The key is you got to find out how to take the batteries out, right? And that's easier said than done. Right? And so the art of can, this series, this experiment is going to break down lessons from 12 different individuals about how do you find the batteries, how do you take them out, and then how do you walk away? Because when you do that, everything changes. And people say, I don't believe it. Okay, fine. Then you're back in can't. I can tell you that it does change because I'm living proof. It's happened to me not just once by losing a business and then recovering, but it's happened several times. Right, Bryan, you know the story that I got hit in a hit and run. My heart and respiration stopped. I had an NDE. I ended up with broken back and a broken neck and 9 other broken bones. And then I could have easily been followed what the doctor said and said, hey, it's going to take you 2 years to recover. You're in your 50s. Don't expect a lot. Well, 142 days later, I was racing. And why did I do that? Is because I didn't accept the status quo of can't. Can't means won't. So when you live in a state of can, then different things happen. Now, on the other side of that, it looks entirely different than what I thought it would look like. Right? I had an expectation that I would go back to doing exactly what I did from a training and racing standpoint, entirely different.
Right.
Better, but entirely different.
Right.
And that's how it works.
That's how it works. That's right. What do you want to talk? What do you want to ask me?
Well, I have 2 questions for you as we round here at 45 minutes, and I want to try and keep this under an hour for this first discussion. But I recall you telling me about an individual you were training with. You were actually doing cycling coaching, and there was a sort of a seminal event that during that period of time that not only were you able to help him beyond just the riding, but you helped him from a business standpoint because of a loop in his head of a boss that he was hearing.
Yeah.
But it also changed the trajectory, I believe, of your career in a really amazing and unexpected way.
I think there's actually 2 stories here. The first one is that how I even got into the coaching space, but we'll get to the other one that's really important, right? Because what Steve is getting at with all of this is that we can create a different reality. We can create a different path. And I think a lot of people will go, yeah, of course. But that's kind of an intellectual experience, right? And I think creating a different path is a full body experience. And just even getting into coaching is not something that I would have ever thought of. I had been in business. I'd been working in the entertainment business. I had been doing a bunch of stuff for, Disney and Sony and all these places, right? That was my mind. I was kind of like, I produce stuff. This is me. This is my identity, right? It came at a time where, though, I was in a business that wasn't going great. It was not long after the banking and housing crisis, and having a lot of identity issues around. So I was on his bike ride and had really kind of come back to cycling after being away for a long time. And I was with a group doing a charity ride, and we were riding from Nashville to New Orleans. And somewhere on this big hill in Alabama, I ended up helping this former triathlete runner just descend on his bike better. He was a terrible descender. And my buddy who had started the charity, who knew me very well, and who's one of my dearest friends, said, when are you just gonna start coaching? like that moment, right? It's like, this is what you need to be doing, Bryan. You need to start coaching. This is it, right? And that's how I kind of got into it, right? So it started just completely accidentally. And so be open to the accidents. But what you're asking about with this particular person, this is someone I'd never met actually in person, right? We had only kind of worked through Zoom meetings. We had only worked through Training Peaks, this system for giving out coaching plans. And by the way, I don't coach cycling anymore. This has been a transition. And it was my last, this person was going to be my last cycling coaching client. I already knew that I was kind of moving into some other direction. I just didn't quite know where. I'd had a sort of an idea. And he came to me at the start of a year and said, I think I want to, he had a lot going on upstairs. He said, I got these pains in my body. I got these pains in my knees. And I think I want to quit cycling, but then I think I want to get fast at cycling. And I think I want to quit and I want to stop from the knees. And I don't know if I can do it, but I think I want to keep going. And I want to beat my friends, but I think I want to quit. I was like, you got a lot going on there, my friend. Let us unpack that. And he told me what he wanted to do. I said, listen, I'm happy to coach you. I'd love to, but you're not going to like the cure. He said, what do you mean I'm not going to like the cure? He said, you're not going to like what I tell you we're going to do. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, you can't do any more group rides. Well, for how long? Until I say, right? And you tell any cycler, you can't ride with friends. For how long? Until I say. And he said, well, why? I said, well, because we have to like work on what's going on upstairs, one. And not a lot of cycling coaches do this anymore. Like a lot of them are very much about, here's your training plan, go. For a period, we lost the human side. Now, I think this is the opportunity with AI, right? AI can write great cycling plans. And now cycling coaches are great accountability partners, great life partners. And this is what we should be doing. This should be our role. Like training plans are a dime a dozen. So he said, well, for how long? I said, listen, just slow your roll, buddy. And this guy, who's an executive in a company. And so he wants the competition. He wants the recognition. He wants the validation of doing well on the group ride, except he keeps getting dropped on the group ride because the pains and all this stuff goes on. Take it away. His knees start to feel better. We start to focus on some other things. His body starts to feel better. His core starts to work better. So guess what? You get to start doing some group rides. Well, how often? Once every 2 weeks. One every 2 weeks. That's what you can do. And he's telling me also like what he does for work, and he talks about the intensity of the work. And he comes back, he's like, I'm getting dropped on the group. And I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, I would just, I get intense and then I pop off and people ride off without me. It's like, there's no reason he shouldn't have been strong. Like I saw his numbers, even though I said the other thing we were going to do is like, we're not going to do any formal strict interval training. We're going to do less interval training than what you might be doing on your own. I want to rewrite that whole script. And so we start to explore what he's saying to himself in those moments when the group is riding away from him. That's what it means to get dropped. For anyone who's not a cyclist, right? It's like you ride, and all of a sudden you're off the back, you're further off the back, and there goes the group, and you're talking really bad things to yourself. And you're like, I suck. You're saying all the things to yourself. I suck. I shouldn't do this. I should just do competitive fly fishing, but I don't know how to fly fish.
Yeah.
And
gap
so,
sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. It doesn't feel great. It's really bad for your ego. It's a place where I'm at kind of right now. Like Bryan's popping off the back a lot. And so I said, hey, what are you saying to yourself in those moments? What's the voice that you're hearing? And what we started to unpack was in those intense moments, he had spent earlier in his career working for an unscrupulous employer who was abusive, who was not only unscrupulous and unethical, but abusive. And that's the voice that was coming up. So we had to work on disempowering that voice and
Took the
noticing
batteries
when
out.
that voice came up as well at intense periods in his work life. And ultimately, what happened was like we dropped the voice, and his measurable wattage, his measurable sustainable power went up like, I don't know, 15, 20 points, which is actually a pretty big jump over the
It's
course of the
huge.
season. And there was
Well,
almost
that shows the
no interval
power.
work.
That shows the power of the mind
Yeah.
over this. And Bryan, you took his batteries out.
Yeah. Well, we redirected where that circuitry was going. Like, but
Yeah,
we certainly stopped giving electricity to a current to that old boss. That's for
yeah,
sure. I mean, we
yeah.
redirected the energy, and this is what this is what your art of can does, right? It's like how do we find the misalignments and redirect the circuitry? But we get so used to training the energy to go in one place, and we don't even clock ourselves doing it, but it's always going to the same place.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to ask you a question, two questions. And the first question you've heard now a couple of times: what is different because you are here?
First of all, I have never heard that question. The fact that you said that one today, the thing that I caught my inner voice doing was going, "Oh fuck, I don't have an answer. Is it the right answer?" Right. So I did the thing. Right. My mind started doing the right thing. It's like, so I think the reason we're here is that you're doing this thing now because of some conversation that we had, and we hardly know each other, right? And we're here having this conversation together. I don't know who's going to see it, but maybe they'll get something from it. I think that
Yeah.
I have conversations that are a lot braver than I've ever had before because I'm willing to share. I pretty much share everything, right? I'm an open book. I don't have to hide my so quote unquote business failures. And I don't think they're sort of business failures so much as they are just missed shots, some of them more colossal than others.
Well, look, there's a great song called "Closing Time." That every beginning is some other beginning's end,
Right. Right.
and I think that that's how we have to look at it. And once you can recognize that you're not defined by your successes or failures, you're defined on by what you're doing, because you are here, right? Then that's what matters.
And I know what I do has impact on people. I don't have to guess, right? I can actually, because I get to see it in action, and I don't need a pat on the back for it anymore. I don't need to come to the spotlight. I don't need any of that. Like, I get to see people in traction, in motion, doing stuff and basically fafoing their way through it, like fuck around and find out, right? And being brave enough to fuck around and find and figure it out. Like, I think that that's pretty great. So I think that's why I'm meant to be here. I want to do what I'm doing now for the next 20 years. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but we're going to figure it out.
That's the beauty of it, is being comfortable with the uncomfortable, being familiar with the unfamiliar, right? All of those things, you can call it whatever you want. But at the end of the day, when you cease being scared of those things, you have the greatest gift that you could possibly have, and that is freedom. You still may have a job, you still have responsibilities, but you have freedom. And there is nothing better than that.
Someone asked me the other day what freedom was, and it was one of those LinkedIn questions. Like, oh, it's having the money to do this. It's having the time the ability to do time, to use my time however I want. And I was like, this is easy. This is like, that's great for all y'all. But if you really want to know, for me, freedom is I don't keep anything in the shadows anymore. I don't have to put a spin on the story. I don't have to dress the story up in a particular script to be palatable so that someone hires me down the road, right? That's all that's irrelevant. That's like stuff that you do and that I do in my 30s and 40s and making things look marketable in a certain way. I don't have to be marketable anymore, period. I just have to be available and I have to be present.
Yeah. And I would say you're also authentic. I think that's the thing that, one of the things that strikes me about you. And I think that to wrap us up, if you can find yourself in a position where you can divorce yourself from the narrator, because that narrator is not you. The critic in the audience or the critic in your head is not you. That is an absolute make-believe mirage. You can do that. You can get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? And you cease being scared. That's where freedom lies. And if you can find freedom, you can find flow, and then everything else changes. So, Bryan, you've been wonderful today. Thank you so much for helping with this little kickoff of this experiment.
Thank you for letting me spark this. You never, like, this is great. Like, we don't know what we're going to spark. This wasn't even an idea 2.5 weeks ago. So
No, it really wasn't. So, but serendipity, you showed up at exactly the right place at the right time with the right idea, and God knows where it's going to go, but it's going to be fun watching. So with that, let's sign off,
congratulations.
and thank you for joining the Art of Can. Thank you for spending time with us in this episode today. As I said in the prologue, after each episode, there is an epilogue. This is where we will summarize what we've discovered in each episode. So let's break down what we covered. You'll find all of this information in the show notes and the transcript as well. One thing that I would ask you is to print out the questions and give them a try. Now try answering them in a ground truth state. Let your heart lead you, not your critic or narrator. That voice will lead you astray with 100% certainty. So here we go. Question 1. What would happen if you were not here? Said another way, question number 2. What should happen because you are here? Question 3. What is the hardest thing mentally, physically, or emotionally, or even spiritually you've ever done? Question 4. What did that teach you? Do you still use that learning today? Question 5. What are you scared of? Now to the lessons. Lesson point 1. What you need hides in plain sight. It's usually disguised as something else. It will find you if you wake up and allow it to do so. Lesson point 2. Disrupting the prison of can't comes from doing something outside the current script. Something hard, mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually. You need to pull the power source of the current feedback loop, and you need to move. Not a lot, just a little. Lesson point 3. Once you disrupt the script and the power source, you must pay attention to the subtle signs and nudges hidden in plain sight that come your way. Don't think about them. Don't ignore them. Don't try to explain them away. Take the invitation. Follow them. Act. Move. Lesson point 4. Once you have short-circuited the noise of can't, the better path of can will begin to illuminate itself. Lesson point 5. Stop worrying about the unknown. Everything that isn't yet is just probability. What you choose defines what becomes. Worrying and fretting just plugs the old power source back in. Become familiar with the unfamiliar. Enjoy the ride. And remember, you have one very powerful tool, the power of choice. Lesson 6. Obvious, large, long-standing, low-hanging fruit isn't the best place to start your journey to finding flow or can as a state of being. Instead, seek the one small thing that's over there by itself. Remove the pebble from the shoe rather than changing your entire training plan. Lesson point 7. Can is in fact a state of being. It's the energy around you. It's the energy inside of you. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, your actions, your decisions, your choices. Can be equally what is and what is next as much as can't. It's your choice. Whatever you choose, the universe will conspire to work with you. Lesson point 8. Contrary to popular belief, choosing can is as easy as choosing can't. This episode has been brought to you by Amplify Flow. If you want to learn more, you can go to amplifyflow.co. We'll see you at our next episode. If you know someone who practices the art of can that you would like to introduce into this experiment, or if you have questions about the art of can or flow, or if you'd simply like to receive a PDF of the questions and lesson points from this episode, please either visit us at amplifyflow.co or email us at info@amplifyflow.co.